Throughout the summer, Dabin has been releasing singles like Drown and When This Is Over, and with both of them having extremely similar styles of artwork, I felt like there was an album on the horizon. That thought came true last month as Dabin released his third album, Between Broken. Two Hearts and Wild Youth have a special place for me in music, and with those two albums in my mind, I had high expectations. Unfortunately, those expectations were not met, and Between Broken is my least favorite of Dabin's discography. Between Broken receives a 5 out of 10 for me, and I'll talk about why in this review. First up, as always, is the Pragmatic Score, which I gave Dabin a 2 out of 5 for. Unfortunately, this album appears to be a compilation of 13 singles more than anything else. There are no song transitions, no album themes, and the title of the album is just the title of the first track. While the first song certainly could be taken as an intro, and how Komorebi could be seen as an interlude, they also act as individual singles on their own, with no clear tells that they serve as said intro and interlude. I can't give this album any credit apart from being 13 separate songs. However, this album didn't do anything noticeably negative with its structure, so it saves itself from a lower score. There isn't anything else to say about this portion of the score since the album was pretty straightforward in that regard, so it's on to the Idealistic Score, beginning with the opening track. Between Broken is the first track, and it honestly reminded me a lot of how Two Hearts worked as the opening track of that album. The song is a very free-flowing structure which acts as one complete piece instead of a traditional song with sections. In terms of how to open an album, this track absolutely works fine. The song itself is very pretty, with a lot of Dabin's signature techniques like his stunning electric guitar work in the climax. When This Is Over is pretty insane. As much as I'll be negative about the album in this review, this song is one of the standouts to that. I love this song. Donovan Woods nails the vocals here, delivering a convincing and unique performance. The structure of the song is reminiscent of Dabin's best work, with a traditional first drop followed by a second drop with Dabin's electric guitar. When This Is Over is my favorite track on the album, and this song was one of the deciding factors for why the final score ended up being a 5 instead of a 4. The next track is Drown, and it was one of the singles released prior to the album. Drown is good, but it's nothing super special in my opinion. The drop is serviceable, but it isn't anything I couldn't find from another artist. The part of this song that I find the most enjoyable is the second verse, where Dabin utilizes some vocal glitches and adds a nice guitar riff, and it makes the second verse stand out just enough from the first verse that it keeps the song interesting. As for Mokita's vocal performance, it's fine. The vocals are done well, but just like the song itself, it felt like the type of vocals I could find from a number of other artists. Again, has a similar problem to Drown, but to a worse degree. Dabin usually has unique drops that I could never find anywhere else, but the drop in this song sounds like an NCS drop. It's not to say that NCS drops are bad, but more to say that I've heard it done countless times before. The structure is also pretty dull, with the song running on verse drop with a little electric guitar tacked onto the end, but this time around the electric guitar just didn't really feel special like it usually does. Starbright has again some of the same problems as the prior tracks. The drop is a drop I could hear from a lot of artists, and the vocalist delivered a vocal performance that was fine, but a sound I've heard before. The song does a couple of things worse and better than the others though. To start with the good news, I really enjoyed the pre-chorus leading into the drop, and I appreciated the changes made to the second verse as well. Where the song loses me though is with the lyrics. To be honest, the lyrics completely took me out of the song. They sounded like lyrics from a middle school relationship, and while there's nothing particularly wrong with that, they just didn't trigger any connection with me personally, so subjectively it just wasn't as good. With the last 3 tracks not being particularly impressive, I was starting to get a little bit worried that the entire album would be like this, but Dabin salvaged it a little bit with Komorebi, which is a captivating instrumental piece. This is the type of music I was expecting from Dabin. It feels like a song only he could produce and nobody else, which was something that I felt heavily from his first 2 albums. Komorebi is definitely a highlight track for me, and it helped serve as a breath of fresh air in between the other tracks. Smoke Signals also felt like a breath of fresh air, as it comes in and breaks the trend of average vocal performances, and I was actually quite impressed with the vocal performance here. I loved the decision to sing the ends of the verses on triplets instead of directly on the beat, as it added a layer of creativity to the final product. I also enjoyed the lyrics in the song, more so than I did lyrics for most other songs. The drops were pretty good, but again, it wasn't anything to write home about. Definitely one of the better tracks, but still with plenty to work on. Holding On. Boy, do I have a love-hate relationship with the song. I think that my biggest problem with this song is that it had so much potential with just a couple changes here and there, but what I ended up getting was more of a case of disappointment. I love the theme of this song, and I love the vocals, and I love the sound design, and I love the structure, and this could be such a good song, but why did Dabin have to construct the first drop like he did? Okay, let me walk through this. The pre-chorus has the vocalist sing the lyrics in a frantic tone that is clearly pushing the tempo of the song forward. Dabin then comes in with an electric guitar riff that plays with 16th notes, further suggesting that the song is trying to amp up the tempo. Then the drop hits, and its slow kicks on the downbeats. Why wasn't the kick done in double time? The entire build-up suggested that this was the direction, and I feel like the correct drop was hanging right there in front of my face and it was ripped away and replaced by some of the most generic percussion I've ever heard. Imagine if that first drop had kicked twice as fast, with a more complex percussion rhythm, and the guitar riff was played on top of it as the connector between the build-up and the drop. It would have been so good. If not for this, what I would consider a mistake, the song would be fantastic. The second drop was super great, and it would have had more impact as a solid grounded drop if the first drop was more frantic. Forever was a song that I looked forward to hearing, as Koste is a great feature to have. His album Bleeding Sun has one of my favorite songs of all time, in Praying, so I had high expectations for this one. As expected, Koste delivers a fantastic vocal performance, but I felt like Dabin dropped the ball again with the drops. The drop was once again good, but it felt like a drop I could find in any proximity playlist if I looked for 5 minutes. I don't mean to sound like beating a dead horse, but the fact that the songs on this album consistently have the same problem should just further explain why I scored the first criteria as a 2. Ready is one of my least favorite tracks on this album, if not my least favorite, because it suffers from the same problems I've mentioned over and over and over again. A vocalist sound that I can find anywhere and drops that I can hear anywhere. I was not a fan of the decision to have the second verse act as a percussive call and response with an electric guitar, and then have the second build-up feature said electric guitar, only for the second drop to be a copy pasta of the first drop with no electric guitar at all. It's also at this point that I realized that the majority of the songs in this album have the same structure, with intro, verse, drop, with a different second half, and then the outro. Songs like Between Broken and Komorebi break away from the structure, but I still get bored hearing most of the tracks with it. Hope It Hurts was better than Ready, but it didn't do anything to fix my bitter mood with how constantly troubling the album structure is. Essinger's vocals in this track and Home from Wild Youth didn't really do it for me, and I once again didn't feel anything from the drop. I want to preface how crazy it is that the drop from Dabin doesn't have me with intense goosebumps. Songs like Another Day, Hold, Alive, Superstar, Part-Time Lover. I could keep listing songs from Dabin that I'll never forget. I expect Dabin's drops to floor me. I don't expect to listen to an entire album with drops I can count on one hand, making me feel emotional. And finally, after all that rambling, I get to talk about a song I enjoyed again. Remember is really good. I was so happy that the album had another strong track up its sleeve. The vocals by Noel Johnson are extremely soothing, and the intro had me captivated from the very start with the details in it. The pacing of the song is done really well, and the drop is perfect for what the song needed. The structure of the song is also super refreshing, as it actually takes time to introduce the entirety of the vocal chorus before starting up the percussion leading into the drop. That kind of structure is the type of originality I wish I saw more of in modern electronic music. The only complaint I have with this one is that I feel like the song could have ended better. I can't actually offer a solution for this one, but I'm confident that there's a better way to end a song than to cut out to a piano with broken vocals, which is an ending I've heard multiple times. Other than that, I'm very happy with this song. Feel Like is the closing track of the album, and it started off not too well with the cringiest first lyrical stanza I've heard in a while. Who unironically rhymes weak with me. The song after that was pretty solid though. The drop was nothing special, but that's practically a given at this point. What the song did offer was a super fun pre-chorus that I can easily envision a crowd screaming their hearts out to, and overall a really solid vocal performance past that first verse. Of the songs in this album, this was probably the best track to close it out. That wraps up all of the tracks, and if it wasn't obvious, I didn't exactly enjoy most of them. However, I was very impressed with a couple of tracks, and the majority of the tracks were at least decent, so I settled on a 3 out of 5 for the Idealistic Score. My biggest problem with this album is that it just felt like Dabin kind of lost a little bit of a special touch. He only had a couple of songs that really struck me. Like what happened to the creative structure and new crazy sound design of songs like Sanctuary. I just didn't feel like any of the songs, apart from the 4 or 5 that I mentioned, being memorable at all. And that concludes my thoughts on Between Broken, an album that I had high expectations for, but due to the repetitive and generic nature of many of the songs, as well as no album structure apart from 13 singles put together, it fell short for me. Another smooth outro.